The Carter Holdings Children's Art Exhibition was the kind of event that made wealthy people feel generous and ordinary people feel invisible. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling of the downtown gallery, casting warm light over rows of crayon drawings and finger paintings displayed on white easels. Women in designer dresses drifted between the tiny masterpieces, holding champagne flutes and nodding at artwork made by hands still too small to tie their own shoes. In the middle of that glittering crowd, a powerful CEO stopped cold when she saw a little girl standing beside a black working-class man. The child had her eyes, her smile, and a birthmark above her collarbone that matched her own. The room fell silent when the CEO looked at the man and asked, "Why does your daughter look like me?" No one expected the single father to stand his ground. And the quiet answer he gave changed everything for both of them. Harry Reid did not belong here. He knew it the moment he walked through the glass doors, his work boots still carrying dust from the morning shift. He was a maintenance worker, the kind of man who fixed leaking pipes and replaced ceiling tiles in buildings where people never learned his name. His hands were rough. His jacket was clean but worn at the elbows, and the security guard near the entrance had watched him a little too long before letting him pass. But none of that mattered, because Alice was pulling him by the hand, and when Alice pulled, the whole world followed. "Daddy, come on. I want to show you where they put it," she said, her voice bright enough to cut through the quiet murmur of the gallery. She was 7 years old, with light brown skin, wide, dark eyes, and a smile that seemed to carry its own gravity. A small, crescent-shaped birthmark sat just above her collarbone, barely visible beneath the collar of her yellow dress, the one Harry had ironed twice that morning to get the wrinkles out. Alice looked nothing like him. Harry was tall, broad-shouldered, dark-skinned, with a face shaped by years of labor and silence. People noticed the difference every time they went out together at the grocery store, at school, pickups at the doctor's office. The looks, the double takes, the quiet calculations strangers made behind polite smiles. Harry never explained. He never felt the need to. Alice was his daughter. That was the beginning and end of it. She led him through the gallery, weaving between adults who stepped aside without really seeing them, until she stopped in front of a small easel near the center of the room. Her painting hung there among dozens of others, a simple piece on white paper, 2 figures holding hands. One was tall and broad, drawn in dark brown crayon. The other was small, with a yellow dress and a wide smile. Above them, in the unsteady handwriting of a child still learning to shape her letters, were 3 words. "Family is a choice." Harry stared at it. Something shifted behind his ribs, the kind of feeling he had learned to carry quietly over the years. He reached down and squeezed her hand. "That's a beautiful painting, baby." "I know," Alice said matter-of-factly. "The tall one is you. See, I gave you muscles." Harry laughed, a low, warm sound that turned a few heads nearby. "I see that. You made me look good." "You already look good, Daddy." He crouched down to her level and looked at the painting again. The 2 figures stood on green grass under a sky that was more purple than blue. There were no other people in the picture. Just the 2 of them holding on to each other like the rest of the world did not exist. It had always been just the 2 of them. Nearly 8 years ago, on a night when the rain came down so hard it sounded like the sky was breaking apart, Harry had found her. He was driving home from a late shift, headlights barely cutting through the storm, when he saw an old sedan pulled to the side of a dead-end road. The hazard lights were off, the engine was cold, and from inside came a sound so faint he almost missed it, a baby crying. He had called the police. They came, filed a report, took the child to the hospital. No identification, no car registration that led anywhere. Just a tiny infant wrapped in a thin blanket and a small silver bracelet on her wrist engraved with 2 letters, EC. Weeks passed, then months. No one came to claim her. Harry visited the foster home 3 times, then 5, then every week. The woman who ran the home told him he did not have to keep coming. He told her he was not coming out of obligation. The adoption took 11 months. Harry had never been married. He worked long hours for modest pay. The caseworker asked him more than once if he understood what he was taking on a child of a different race, with no known medical history, no family background, nothing. He understood. He signed the papers, and from that day forward, Alice was his. 7 years of bedtime stories, packed lunches, and a love so steady it never needed to raise its voice. Now she stood beside him in this gallery, pointing at her own artwork with the confidence of someone who had never once doubted where she belonged. On the other side of the room, Evelyn Carter moved through the exhibition the way she moved through everything, with precision control and a careful distance from anything that might require genuine feeling. She was the CEO of Carter Holdings, one of the largest real estate and media conglomerates on the East Coast. 41 years old, sharp-featured with dark eyes that could make a boardroom fall silent with a single glance. She wore a tailored black suit, her hair pulled back, a single strand of pearls at her throat, every detail deliberate, every surface polished. The exhibition was her company's annual charity initiative. She attended because it was expected. She smiled at the children's artwork because the cameras were watching. And she kept her remarks short, professional, and void of anything personal, because that was how Evelyn Carter survived. No one in the room knew what she carried beneath that armor. No one knew about the nights she spent staring at the ceiling of her penthouse apartment, wondering what her child's voice might sound like. No one knew about the silver bracelet she had bought 8 years ago, a bracelet she never got to place on her baby's wrist because by the time she woke up in that hospital bed, the baby was already gone. She had buried that grief so deep, it had become part of her architecture. It held her up even as it hollowed her out. Evelyn walked along the row of easels, glancing at each painting with practiced politeness. A house with a red door, a dog chasing a butterfly, a family of stick figures under a rainbow. She gave each one a brief nod and moved on. Then she stopped. The painting in front of her showed 2 people holding hands, one large, one small. 3 words were written above them in a child's handwriting: "Family is a choice." Something flickered across Evelyn's face. A crack in the surface, barely visible, quickly sealed. She looked at the painting for a long moment, then turned her head to find the artist, and the ground beneath her shifted. A little girl stood a few feet away, holding the hand of a tall black man in a worn jacket. She had light brown skin, wide dark eyes, a smile that seemed too familiar, and just above her collarbone, barely visible beneath the yellow dress, a small crescent-shaped birthmark. Evelyn knew that birthmark. She had seen it only once before on a newborn baby she barely got to hold before everything was taken from her. Her lungs stopped working. The champagne glass in her hand trembled. The noise of the gallery collapsed into a high-pitched silence that only she could hear. The girl looked up at her with open, curious eyes. No fear, no recognition, just the natural curiosity of a child who noticed a stranger staring. "Do you like my painting?" the girl asked. Evelyn did not hear the question. Her eyes moved from the birthmark to the eyes to the shape of the mouth, to the way the girl tilted her head, and every detail was a mirror reflecting something she had lost. She turned to the man standing beside the child. Her voice came out steady, controlled, the way it always did when everything inside her was falling apart. "Why does your daughter look like me?" The words landed like a stone in still water. Conversations nearby went quiet. Heads turned. A woman holding a program lowered it slowly. A photographer near the entrance looked up from his camera. Harry felt Alice's hand tighten around his fingers. He looked down and saw her pressing closer to his leg, her eyes wide, not frightened but confused. She whispered, "Daddy, what's happening?" He placed his hand gently on her head. Then he looked at the woman standing before him, this woman in her expensive suit, with her controlled voice and her trembling hands, and he did not flinch. Harry had spent 7 years knowing this moment might come. Not this exact scene, not this exact woman, but something like it. The day someone would look at Alice and claim a connection he could not explain. He had rehearsed nothing. He had no speech prepared. He only had the truth. Nearly 8 years ago, he said, his voice calm and low, I found a baby in an abandoned car on the side of Route 9. It was raining. She was alone. No name, no papers. Just a silver bracelet with 2 letters on it. He watched Evelyn's face change, watched the color drain from her skin, watched her jaw tighten, watched her eyes fill with something she clearly was not used to feeling in public. I called the police, Harry continued. They put her in the system. Nobody came for her. I visited her every week for almost a year, and when nobody came, I adopted her. The gallery was completely silent now. Every pair of eyes was locked on the 2 of them, the CEO in her tailored suit and the maintenance worker in his worn jacket, standing on opposite sides of a truth that neither of them had been prepared for. Evelyn opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Harry said one more thing, not to defend himself, not to challenge her, just to answer the only question that mattered. I don't know why she looks like you, but I know why she looks safe. Because she is loved. The sentence hit Evelyn like a wall. Her lips pressed together. Her chin dipped. And for the first time in years, in front of cameras, in front of strangers, in front of a man she had never met, her eyes turned red. She could not speak. She could not move. She simply stood there, held in place by a sentence that had broken through every defense she had ever built. At her feet, still holding her father's hand, Alice tugged gently on Harry's sleeve. Her small voice rose up through the silence, steady and certain. Can we go home, Daddy? Harry lifted her into his arms. He held her close, resting her head against his shoulder, and turned away from Evelyn Carter, away from the cameras, away from the whispers, away from the question that had just cracked open both of their lives. He walked toward the exit without looking back. Behind him, Evelyn stood alone in the middle of the gallery. Her hands were shaking. Her chest was tight. And on the easel beside her, the painting of 2 figures holding hands stared back at her with its simple, devastating truth. Family is a choice. Evelyn did not sleep that night. She sat in the dark of her penthouse apartment, still wearing the black suit from the exhibition, her shoes kicked off by the door, her pearls coiled on the kitchen counter like something shed. The city lights below her windows blurred into streaks of gold and white, and she stared through them without seeing. The girl's face would not leave her mind. The eyes, the birthmark, the way she tilted her head when she asked about the painting, the same tilt Evelyn's mother used to have, the one that ran through the women in her family like a signature written into bone. And the bracelet. 2 letters. E.C. Evelyn Carter. She had ordered that bracelet during her 7th month of pregnancy, had it engraved herself at a small jeweler on Madison Avenue. She had never told anyone about it. Not her assistant. Not her therapist. Not the private investigators she had hired over the years to search for her child. The memory came back now, not in pieces but whole, as if it had been waiting behind a locked door for exactly this moment. 8 years ago, Evelyn was not yet the woman the world knew. She was 33, a senior vice president at a firm she would later acquire and rename. Ambitious, driven, already feared in boardrooms. But in the private hours of her life, she was in love with a man named Jonathan Prescott, the eldest son of the Prescott family, whose influence stretched across banking politics and old money networks that predated most of the companies on Wall Street. They had been together for 2 years. Jonathan was charming, educated, and careful with his public image. When Evelyn told him she was pregnant, his face changed in a way she had never seen before. Not joy, not surprise. Something closer to calculation. Within a week, his family intervened. His mother, his father, their attorneys. The message was delivered without emotion, and without room for negotiation, the child could not exist publicly. A pregnancy out of wedlock tied to the Prescott name would create a scandal that neither family could afford. Evelyn was given a choice: end the pregnancy and preserve her position, or keep the child and lose everything. The partnership, the funding, the relationship, all of it. Evelyn refused. She carried the baby to term in secret, giving birth at a private clinic outside the city. She held her daughter for less than 72 hours. She memorized the weight of her in her arms, the sound of her breathing, the tiny crescent-shaped mark above her collarbone. She placed the silver bracelet on the baby's wrist and whispered a name she had chosen months before, a name she never got to make official. Then the complications came: postpartum hemorrhaging, emergency surgery, 3 days in intensive care. And when Evelyn finally opened her eyes, the room was empty. The bassinet was gone. The nurses said Jonathan had come during the night. He told them he was the father. He took the baby. Evelyn called him from her hospital bed, barely able to sit up. Jonathan answered once. His voice was flat, rehearsed. He told her the child had been placed with a good family, that it was better this way, that she should focus on recovery and move forward. She never heard from him again. His number changed. His family's lawyers sent a single letter stating that any attempt to contact the Prescotts would result in legal action. The message was clear: the child was gone, and Evelyn was expected to act as though she had never existed. But Evelyn did not move forward. She hired investigators. She filed missing persons reports. She spent tens of thousands of dollars chasing leads that went nowhere. Jonathan had not placed the baby with a family. He had handed her off to someone, a driver, an associate, a name that no record could confirm, and that person had driven away into the night. The trail ended on a dead-end road off Route 9, where an old sedan was later found abandoned with a cold engine and an empty back seat. No one connected the dots. The baby who entered the foster system had no name, no paperwork, no traceable origin. And the woman searching for her daughter had no idea her child was only 40 minutes away, being held in the arms of a maintenance worker who visited a foster home every week because he could not stop thinking about the sound of her crying in the rain. The years passed. Evelyn built her empire on the foundation of that grief. She acquired companies. She dominated negotiations. She became the CEO that magazine covers celebrated and competitors feared. And every year on the anniversary of her daughter's birth, she sat alone in the dark and held the duplicate bracelet she had made, the one engraved with the same 2 letters, and let herself feel the weight of everything she had lost. Now, sitting in her penthouse after the exhibition, she picked up her phone and made a call to her attorney. "I need a DNA test arranged," she said, "and I need it done quietly." The call to Harry came 2 days later. It was not from Evelyn directly, but from a woman who introduced herself as a legal coordinator from Carter Holdings. She was polite, professional, and careful with her words. She explained that Ms. Carter was requesting a voluntary DNA comparison. No legal action, no pressure, simply a request. Harry sat at the kitchen table of his small apartment, the phone pressed to his ear, watching Alice through the doorway. She was on the living room floor, drawing with crayons, humming a song she had learned at school. Her yellow dress from the exhibition was draped over the back of a chair, waiting to be washed. He agreed. Not because he owed Evelyn anything, not because he was afraid of what the results might show. He agreed because he had always known somewhere in the quiet part of his mind, where he kept the things he did not say out loud, that this day would come. The bracelet, the letters, the child who looked nothing like him. He had carried those questions for 7 years, and he was not the kind of man who ran from answers. The test was done at a private clinic the following week. A simple cheek swab for Alice, who sat on Harry's lap and asked the nurse if the cotton stick was also used for painting. Harry smiled. The nurse laughed, and then they went home and waited. But the world did not wait with them. Someone at the exhibition had taken a photograph, Harry and Alice on one side, Evelyn on the other, the painting between them. It appeared on a local gossip blog within 48 hours, alongside a headline that read, "Billionaire CEO confronts blue-collar dad at charity event, claims his daughter looks like her." Within a week, the story had been picked up by 3 national outlets. A tabloid ran a longer piece with the words, "The janitor's daughter, is she the missing heir to the Carter fortune?" Harry did not read the articles, but Alice's classmates did, or rather their parents did, and children are mirrors of the adults who raise them. It started on a Tuesday. Alice came home from school with her backpack dragging on the ground and her eyes red. She did not run to Harry the way she usually did. She walked slowly, sat on the couch, and pulled her knees to her chest. Harry knelt in front of her. "What happened, baby?" Alice's lip trembled. "Kyle said my real mom is rich. He said I only live with you because you're a janitor and she didn't want you." The words landed in Harry's chest like stones dropped from a height. He kept his face steady the way he always did when the world tried to take something from him. "Look at me, Alice." She looked up. Her dark eyes were wet, her small hands gripping the fabric of her dress. "You are mine," Harry said, "in every way that matters. Do you hear me?" Alice nodded. She climbed into his arms and he held her there on the couch for a long time, his hand resting on the back of her head, his jaw tight. She fell asleep against his shoulder, and Harry carried her to bed the way he had done every night for 7 years, gently, carefully, as though she were the most important thing in the world. Because she was. Later that night, after the apartment was dark and quiet, Harry sat alone at the kitchen table. He opened the small wooden box he kept on the top shelf of the closet and took out the silver bracelet. It was tarnished now, the letters EC barely legible. He turned it over in his hands, feeling the weight of it, not the metal, but everything it represented. The night he found her, the months of waiting, the moment he signed the papers and became a father. For the first time in 7 years, Harry allowed himself to be afraid. The DNA results arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered in a sealed envelope to Evelyn's attorney. The match was conclusive. Alice was Evelyn's biological daughter. Evelyn read the results in her office, standing behind her desk with the door closed. She pressed the paper flat against the glass surface and read the numbers twice, then a third time. Her hands did not shake this time. Her eyes did not turn red. She simply stood there, absorbing the confirmation of something her body had already told her the moment she saw that little girl in the yellow dress. Her daughter was alive. Her daughter was 7 years old. Her daughter called another person daddy and drew pictures of a family that did not include her. Evelyn asked to meet Alice. Harry agreed on one condition: the meeting would happen on Alice's terms, in a place she felt comfortable without lawyers or cameras. They met at a park near Harry's apartment on a Saturday afternoon. Evelyn arrived in a car that cost more than Harry's annual salary. She stepped out wearing clothes that were deliberately casual jeans, a white blouse, flat shoes as though she had studied what ordinary mothers wore and tried to replicate it. She carried a gift bag with a stuffed elephant and a set of watercolor paints that came from an art supply store Harry had never heard of. Alice was polite. She said thank you for the gifts. She held the stuffed elephant and examined the paints with genuine interest. But for the entire hour they spent at the park, she did not let go of Harry's hand. Not once. When Evelyn asked her about school, Alice answered in short sentences. When Evelyn asked about her painting, Alice brightened a little but still turned to Harry after every answer, as if checking to make sure he was still there. On the walk home, Alice was quiet for a long time. Then she looked up at Harry and asked the question he had been dreading. "Is she my mom?" Harry kept walking. The sidewalk was cracked and a line of ants marched along the edge. He watched them for a few steps before answering. "She's the person who brought you into this world." Alice considered this. Her brow furrowed the way it always did when she was working through something bigger than herself. Then she said, with the plain certainty that only a child can carry, "But you're the one who stayed." Harry did not answer. He took her hand and held it tighter, and they walked the rest of the way home in the amber light of the late afternoon. The weeks that followed were difficult. Evelyn began visiting more frequently, each time bringing something: new books, clothes, and invitation to see her apartment. She showed Alice a bedroom she had decorated in soft lavender and white, with a bookshelf full of new hardcovers and a window that overlooked the city skyline. Alice's eyes went wide when she saw it. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books and sat on the bed, bouncing lightly. Harry watched from the doorway and felt something cold settle in his stomach. Evelyn turned to him later after Alice had gone to explore the living room. Her voice was careful but direct. "I can give her everything, Harry. The best schools, the best opportunities, everything she deserves." Harry looked at the lavender room, the room that had been designed for a child who did not live here by a woman trying to fill a 7-year hole with furniture and good intentions. "Everything is not what she needs," he said. "She needs consistency. She needs to know that the people who love her won't disappear." The words struck harder than he intended. Evelyn's expression shifted, not anger, but something raw, something wounded. Because she was the one who had disappeared, not by choice, not willingly, but the result was the same. She had been absent for 7 years of her daughter's life, and no amount of lavender paint could erase that distance. Alice began to change during this period. She was quieter at home, more thoughtful, in a way that did not suit a 7-year-old. One evening, Harry found a new drawing on her desk. 3 figures this time, one tall and dark, one tall and light, and one small in the middle. The small figure stood at equal distance from the other 2, her arms reaching out in both directions as if she could not decide who to hold on to. Harry stared at that drawing for a long time after Alice went to bed. Then the letter arrived. It came on a Monday in a crisp white envelope with the name of a law firm embossed in the corner. Harry opened it at the kitchen table, read it once, then folded it and set it down. The words were formal, but their meaning was blunt. Evelyn Carter was filing a petition for custody of the minor child known as Alice Reed. Her legal team had framed it carefully, not as a removal, but as a transition of primary guardianship, supported by evidence of biological parentage, financial capability, and the resources to provide a superior standard of living. The language was clean and professional, the kind of language that made taking a child from her father sound like a reasonable business decision. Harry read it again that evening after Alice was asleep. He sat on the front steps of the apartment building, the envelope on his knee, the street light above him buzzing faintly. The night air was cool, and somewhere down the block a dog barked twice and then went quiet. The screen door creaked behind him. Alice appeared in her pajamas, holding a glass of milk with both hands. She sat down beside him on the step, her bare feet on the cold concrete. "You look sad, Daddy." Harry put his arm around her. His voice was steady, but his eyes were red at the edges. "I'm okay, baby. I'm just thinking about how much I love you." Alice leaned into him and sipped her milk. They sat together in the quiet father and daughter on a concrete step outside a building that was not much to look at, but it was theirs. The next day, Harry went to see Evelyn. He did not bring a lawyer. He did not bring documents. He went alone in his work clothes with dust on his boots and nothing in his hands. Evelyn's assistant led him into a corner office on the 32nd floor. The city stretched out below the windows in every direction. Evelyn sat behind her glass desk, her posture straight, a pen in her hand that she was not using. She looked at Harry the way she looked at everyone who entered that office, measuring, assessing, calculating. But Harry was not a negotiation. He was not a number on a spreadsheet. He was a man standing in a room full of glass, and he was about to do the most terrifying thing he had ever done. "If you take me to court," he said, "you'll probably win. You have the money, you have the lawyers, you have everything the system respects." Evelyn watched him, the pen motionless in her hand. "But let me tell you something." Harry's voice did not waver. "If Alice wants to be with you, I won't fight. Not because I give up, but because loving her means I can't put her through a war." He took a breath. The office was silent except for the faint hum of the ventilation system 32 floors above the street. "She is not something that was lost," Harry said. She is someone who was found, and I would rather lose her than let her watch two people tear each other apart over her." The words hung in the air between them. Harry stood still, his hands at his sides, his back straight. He had just given away the only leverage he had the willingness to fight, and in doing so, he had revealed something that no amount of money could purchase. The kind of love that releases instead of grips. The kind of strength that looks like surrender, but is in truth the hardest thing a person can do. Evelyn set the pen down. Her hand was trembling again the way it had at the gallery. She looked at Harry, really looked at him, and for the first time she did not see a maintenance worker or an obstacle or a man standing between her and her daughter. She saw a father, a real one. The kind she had always wished she had, the kind Jonathan Prescott could never have been. She tried to speak and could not. Her mouth opened, then closed. She pressed her fingers against the glass desk until her knuckles turned white, holding herself together the way she had always done, through force, through will, through sheer refusal to break. But something behind her eyes had shifted. Something had cracked open and would not close again. She had spent 8 years fighting to get her daughter back. But in this moment, watching this man offer to give up the person he loved most in the world rather than cause her pain, Evelyn understood something that no boardroom, no legal strategy, no amount of power had ever taught her. Keeping Alice was never about winning. It was about deserving. And right now, standing in this office with nothing but his worn jacket and his unbreakable dignity, Harry Reid was the only one in the room who did. 3 days later, Evelyn called her attorney and withdrew the custody petition. Her legal team objected. They had built a strong case: biological parentage, financial superiority, a lavender bedroom already furnished and waiting. They told her she would almost certainly win. They told her the judge would see reason. They used words like optimal outcome and best interest of the child, as if they were discussing a merger and not a 7-year-old girl who drew pictures of her father with muscles. Evelyn listened to all of it. Then she told them to file the withdrawal by end of day and walked out of the conference room. She did not do it because Harry had asked her to. She did it because of something that had been building inside her since the moment he stood in front of her desk with dust on his boots and nothing to bargain with, a realization so sharp it cut through every layer of armor she had spent 8 years constructing. If she took Alice by force, by legal maneuvering, by financial leverage, by the sheer weight of her resources, she would become Jonathan. She would be the person who used power to take a child from someone who loved her. She would repeat the very act that had destroyed her own life, only this time she would not be the victim. She would be the one inflicting the wound, and she could not live with that. The following Saturday, Evelyn drove to Harry's apartment. Not in the car that cost more than his annual salary, she had taken a cab. She wore no jewelry, no tailored suit, just a gray sweater and jeans with her hair down for the first time in longer than she could remember. Harry opened the door and looked at her. He did not speak. He stepped aside and let her in. Alice was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by crayons and construction paper. She looked up when Evelyn entered, and her expression was careful, not hostile, but guarded the way children become when they sense that the adults around them are carrying something heavy. Evelyn sat down on the floor, not on the couch, not in a chair. On the floor, cross-legged at Alice's level. Harry leaned against the kitchen doorway and watched. "Alice," Evelyn said, and her voice was different now, not the voice she used in boardrooms, not the controlled tone she had used at the gallery. It was quieter, unsteady, real. "I want to tell you something, and I want you to know that whatever you feel after I tell you is okay." Alice set down her crayon, a purple one, the same shade she had used for the sky in her exhibition painting, and gave Evelyn her full attention. Evelyn took a breath. She had rehearsed this in her penthouse apartment, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, trying to find words simple enough for a child and honest enough for herself. "A long time ago," she said, "I had a baby, a little girl, and I loved her very much. But someone took her away from me when I was sick. I looked for her for a very long time. I never stopped looking." Alice's eyes were wide, unblinking. She glanced at Harry, who gave her a small nod, the kind that said, "It's okay, I'm right here." "When I saw you at the art show," Evelyn continued, "I thought I felt that maybe you were that little girl, and the doctors said you are." The room was still. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant noise of traffic through the thin apartment walls. Alice looked down at her hands. She picked up the purple crayon and turned it slowly between her fingers. Then she looked back at Evelyn with an expression that was far too old for her face, a look that belonged to someone who had already learned at 7 that the world was more complicated than it should be. "Were you sad?" Alice asked. Evelyn's throat tightened. "Every single day." Alice nodded as though this answer confirmed something she had already suspected. She looked at Harry again. He was still leaning in the doorway, his arms crossed, his face calm, but his eyes bright. Then Alice looked back at Evelyn and spoke with the plain, unguarded honesty that only children possess, the kind that adults spend their entire lives trying to recover. "You don't have to be sad anymore," she said. "But I want to stay here with Daddy." The words filled the small apartment like sunlight through a window. They were not a rejection. They were not cruelty. They were a child drawing a line with the only tool she had, her heart, and placing herself exactly where she felt safe. Evelyn closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek and she let it fall. When she opened her eyes again, she was looking at Harry, and what passed between them in that moment was something neither of them could have planned or predicted. It was not romance. It was not forgiveness. It was recognition, two people standing on opposite sides of the same love, finally seeing each other clearly. Harry straightened up from the doorway. His voice was low, steady, the same voice that had answered Evelyn's question at the gallery, the same voice that had spoken in her office on the 32nd floor. "You can be part of her life," he said, "if you're willing to be patient, if you're willing to let her lead." Evelyn wiped her face with the back of her hand. She looked at Alice, who was already returning to her drawing, the crisis resolved in her mind as simply and cleanly as a page being turned. "I'm willing," Evelyn said. That was how it began, not with a legal agreement or a custody schedule drafted by attorneys, but with a quiet promise made on the floor of a small apartment, while a 7-year-old colored with a purple crayon. Evelyn came back the following Saturday, and the Saturday after that. She did not bring expensive gifts anymore. She brought herself, which turned out to be both harder and more valuable than anything she could have purchased. The first few visits were awkward. Evelyn did not know how to sit on a floor and draw. She did not know the names of Alice's favorite colors, or which cartoons she watched on Saturday mornings, or that she liked her grilled cheese cut diagonally, never straight. These were the small, ordinary details that Harry carried effortlessly, the accumulated knowledge of 7 years of showing up every single day, and Evelyn had none of them. But she learned. She sat on the floor and drew trees that Alice politely critiqued. She learned that purple was Alice's favorite color, and that she did not like the crusts on her sandwiches, and that she talked to her stuffed animals before bed as though they were a board of directors receiving her daily briefing. She learned that Alice laughed with her whole body tilting backward with her mouth open, and that the sound of it was the most beautiful thing Evelyn had ever heard. Harry watched from a distance that grew shorter each week. He did not hover. He did not supervise. He simply existed nearby, a steady presence that allowed Alice to explore this new relationship at her own pace. And slowly, as the weeks became months, he saw something shift in Evelyn that he had not expected. She was not performing anymore. The controlled, polished surface that had defined her at the gallery and in her office was gone. In its place was something raw and uncertain and deeply human, a woman learning how to be present without being in charge. A mother who had missed 7 years and was trying with visible effort not to rush through the catching up. One evening in late autumn, Harry walked into the living room and found Alice and Evelyn lying on the carpet side by side, drawing on the same piece of paper. Their heads were close together, and Alice was explaining with great seriousness why the sky in her drawing was purple and not blue. "Because blue is boring," Alice said. "Purple is what the sky looks like when it's thinking." Evelyn laughed a real laugh, unguarded and warm, and Alice grinned, pleased with herself. Harry stood in the doorway and felt something release in his chest. Not fear, not grief, something closer to relief. The kind that comes when you realize the thing you were afraid of losing was never really at risk, because love, when it is real, does not divide. It expands. That night after Evelyn had gone home, Harry found Alice's latest drawing on the kitchen table. 3 figures stood side by side, their hands connected in a chain. One was tall and dark, one was tall and light, and one was small, standing between them, not pulled in either direction, but held by both. Beneath the figures, in Alice's careful, improving handwriting, were 2 words, "My family." Harry picked up the drawing and held it for a long time. Then he placed it on the refrigerator door next to the older paintings and stepped back to look at all of them together, a gallery of crayon and construction paper that told the story of a family being built one drawing at a time. Years passed. Alice grew. She went from crayons to watercolors, from construction paper to canvas. She attended a good school, not the most expensive one Evelyn had suggested, but the one Harry and Evelyn had chosen together, sitting at the kitchen table with brochures spread between them like a peace treaty written in glossy photographs. Alice grew taller. Her dark eyes stayed the same. The crescent birthmark above her collarbone became a part of her the way all birthmarks do, something she forgot about most days and noticed only when someone new pointed it out. She had Harry's quiet strength and Evelyn's sharp mind, and something that belonged entirely to herself, a way of seeing the world that was both gentle and unafraid. She never called Evelyn Mom. She called her Evelyn, and later, when she was older, she sometimes called her Ev. Evelyn never asked for more than that. She had learned in those early Saturdays on the apartment floor that the titles people carry matter far less than the things they do. Then came the evening when Alice, no longer a little girl, but a young woman standing at the edge of her own life, walked onto a stage at a community center where both Harry and Evelyn sat in the audience. The event was a local fundraiser for foster care programs, a cause Alice had chosen herself for reasons that needed no explanation. She stood behind the microphone, looked out at the crowd, and spoke. "When I was 7, a woman asked my father why I looked like her, and my father, a man who worked with his hands, who never had much, who chose me when no one else would, he said something I carry with me every day. He said, 'She is loved.' That was his answer. Not DNA, not money, not power. Love." Her voice was steady, carrying across the room the way her father's voice had carried across that gallery so many years ago. "People ask me what family means. I say family isn't who you look like. It's who stays." The audience applauded. Some of them wiped their eyes. A few stood up. In the 3rd row, Harry and Evelyn sat side by side, not as husband and wife, not as opponents, not as a maintenance worker and a CEO, but as 2 people who had learned through years of patience and sacrifice and stubborn, imperfect love that a child does not belong to anyone. A child belongs with the people who show up. Harry looked at Evelyn. She was crying quietly, the way she had learned to do, not the controlled, sealed-off grief of the woman she used to be, but something open and clean. She caught his eye and nodded. He nodded back. And in that small exchange, everything that needed to be said had been said. On stage, Alice smiled. The same smile she had carried since she was 7 years old, standing in a gallery in a yellow dress, holding her father's hand, asking a stranger if she liked her painting. The same smile, the same girl. Grown now, but still anchored to the truth she had drawn in crayon all those years ago on a piece of white paper in the unsteady handwriting of a child who already knew what most adults spend their whole lives trying to learn. family is a choice, and love is what makes it real. If this story stayed with you even just for a moment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment and tell me, what does family mean to you? And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. We share stories like this every week, stories that remind us that the most powerful thing in the world isn't money or status. It's showing up. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. Thank you for being here.